Goodbye. Ow. Okay. Oh my god. Oh hi, welcome to Sadness Fault, where I review films and TV shows and give my opinions that no one really cares about, but will give anyway. Today, I am reviewing something that is underrated, underappreciated, and undervalued by the very own streaming service that it's on. I am talking about the 2022 anime Summertime Rendering. It is so freaking good, and no one really knows about it because the streaming service that's on Disney/Hulu didn't advertise it, so no one even knew it existed. And that's why I want to talk about it. But first, if you haven't watched this anime yet, you need to. It is an amazing sci-fi thriller that keeps you on your toes with mind-blowing twists and turns and just freaking amazing, smart characters. I'm actually going to start with a short non-spoiler review and recap just so that I can try to convince you even more to watch this anime. Then I'll talk about spoilery stuff and go over how I changed the ending, which is not bad. It's a fine, satisfying ending. It's just I would have personally done something a little bit different. Anyways, enough with the yada yada. Let's get into Summertime Rendering spoilers. Not about just yet, but I'll let you know when we get there. Summertime Rendering follows Shinpei, who returns to his home island after being away for 2 years to attend his childhood friend's funeral, Ushio. While at the funeral, he's told that Ushio drowned while trying to save another kid from drowning. However, all is not what it seems. Throughout the day, Shinpei learns there's more into the story. He finds out that when Ushio's body was examined, they found ligature marks around her neck, implying that she was strangled, which means that we have a murder mystery on our hands, but things get even stranger. Shinpei is told that a few days before her death, Ushio saw a doppelganger of herself. He's told that this could be a shadow, which is referencing the shadow sickness, a local island legend. The way the shadow sickness works is that if you see someone who looks exactly like you, that is your shadow, and you only have a few days to live before it kills you and replaces you. I'll go ahead and say this now that is indeed what is happening. Not really a spoiler since you learned that in the first episode. It becomes quickly clear that these shadows have started taking over the island, and it's up to Shinpei and his friends to stop them. A neat thing about Shinpei and a huge factor of the story is that Shinpei has the ability to travel back in time every time he dies. However, and what I really like about his powers is that it has limits. Unlike other types of stories similar to this like Groundhog Day or ReZero, Shinpei never resets at the same starting point. Every time he dies, he resets later in the day, which means he has a limit to how many times he can reset. Or a loop, as they say in the anime, and whatever happens before the next reset point is set in stone. This raises the stakes as he doesn't have an unlimited number of tries, and he has to be very careful about his actions because he won't always be able to go back and change them. And that does happen in the anime. There are several times where something goes wrong or a bad decision was made, and Shinpei is unable to go back far enough to change them, and he has to deal with the consequences. Now, I just need to take a moment to praise the editing. Oh my god, the editing to this show is brilliant. You'll see a sequence of shots that seem to not make sense or just seem unordinary, but when Shinpei loops back and you see those sequence of shots again, everything just clicks and you get that oh moment. Everything is carefully thought out, everything is brilliantly connected, and there are real consequences of different actions. We see this in the anime as the tiniest little action that Shinpei does changes different characters' actions, and that's something we see Shinpei having to work around. The last thing I want to mention before I get to spoilers are the characters. My god, the characters. I saw a Reddit post that I think sums it up nicely, that Shinpei is a smart protagonist in a world where everyone is smart. Very accurate. All the characters pull their weight, all the characters are valuable. Well, except for Tetsu, but that's actually a running gag. Basically, it's not just Shinpei mastermind everything, the other characters are very active at taking down the shadows, and they're all well developed. And now is the time to click away and watch this anime if you haven't already. But come back when you do, please. I'll miss you. But it is spoiler time. Since I don't have a lot of dislikes, I'll go ahead and start with those. Hated the fan service. I always hate seeing fan service in anime, and fortunately there's not a lot in this one, but it is there. And why are all the boob sounds the same? Across every anime, why do they always sound like this? And just why? Hated Shadow Ushio pulling her punch in episode 22 when she goes to do the final blow on Hiruko, the main villain, because her fists aren't meant for violence, which results in Hiruko not being fully killed. Up to that point, Ushio didn't pull punches or hesitate, so it's a bit out of character that she would here, and also just such a cliche, and I hate it. I'll talk more about this later, but I do think all the characters are well developed, except for Tokiko. I do think she gets a bit shafted and is underdeveloped. I have not read the manga, so maybe she does get more development in there. I am just basing my opinions on the anime alone. I thought the shadow babies were weird. Something about them I just didn't like. And Shide constantly impregnating Hiruko to stay alive. Was that Was that really necessary? Couldn't they have done anything else? Same idea in episode 23 when Shadow Ushio is getting weaker from exhaustion, so she starts turning into a child in a bathing suit. Was that really necessary? I'm also not the biggest fan of the ending personally, but I'll go over that at the end of the video. But besides those things, I don't have any other major dislikes. It's a good anime. Time to move on to the likes. The first 5 episodes slap, I'm not gonna lie. All the important characters and character dynamics are established. We get introduced to the main issue, which is the shadows killing everyone on the island, and we learn how Shinpei's time travel works. There's also just so many twists that happen. I knew nothing about the anime before I watched it, so I was shocked when Shinpei saw Ushio walking around the festival. This is obviously Shadow Ushio, but I was not expecting to see her. My favorite moment though is when Shinpei and his friends are at the shrine, and it's revealed that that's not the real Shinpei. Just the way those sequence of events were edited were so good at hiding that it was Shadow Shinpei in a way that didn't feel stretched. What I mean is that once you know that it's Shadow Shinpei, it's pretty clear where he switched with the real Shinpei. It's an unexpected moment, but doesn't just come out of left field. I really enjoyed how Shinpei's powers were shown and the limits that it had. A benefit the limits had to the story besides raising the stakes is that we didn't have to constantly see Shinpei doing the same thing over and over again, because all the beginning work or actions that did help him would be set in stone. So the story doesn't need to constantly go back and reestablish everything. I also loved how unexpected some of the loops were. For instance, the 7th loop, where Shinpei is out of nowhere killed at the end of episode 14. Boom, done, over. Just once again, the story is raising the stakes because Shinpei can be killed at any moment. But my favorite loop is the 8th one. I love the cinematography behind it. Shadow Ushio, Shinpei's strongest ally and friend, is killed right in front of him. He is then impaled and thrown backwards, and we get a slow motion POV of him flying backwards. There's then voiceover dialogue explaining the events leading up to that point, as well as slow motion of Hizuru and Tokiko realizing something is wrong and attacking. It's unexpected, emotional, action-packed. I mean, what more could you want? And then the beginning of the very next loop starts with the side characters getting a call from Shinpei, filling them in about Shadow Ushio getting killed and where to meet, only for it to be revealed that it's Shadow Shinpei making the call and it's a trap. It's a trap! What a way to follow an emotional episode ending with that. And it's funny because we already knew a Shadow Shinpei existed, we already saw this scheme before, and yet it works again because of how sneakily the shots are edited. Don't kick the camera. And what truly carries this anime are the characters. I've already said this, but these are smart, proactive characters. Except Tetsu. Hizuru is obviously a big help in stopping the shadows, and is huge in helping both Shinpei and the audience in understanding what exactly the shadows are and how they work. But she doesn't just feel like a plot device or someone there just to tell us facts. She's a fully fleshed out character with her own motives, and has that backstory that justifies how she knows so much about the shadows. She's also just a complete badass through and through. Her ability to switch herself with her shadow twin brother Rinosuke and use his abilities was really cool to see play out and added depth to her character. She is literally haunted by the ghost of her twin brother, to which she feels partially responsible for his death. But what's different here is that rather than be brought down by a twin's constant presence, she weaponized his abilities in order to avenge him and make things right, which just shows how capable and strong she really is. Shadow Ushio is also hugely impactful. Her abilities lead to great action sequences, and the chemistry between her and Shinpei is strong. She also has a great relationship with her younger sister Mio. Freaking love Mio. She's empathetic with a strong sense of right and wrong, and is willing to do what's necessary without hesitation. But I think the strongest thing Shadow Ushio brings is the tragedy that the real Ushio is gone. We as an audience don't get to know the real Ushio, but rather her copy. Shadow Ushio is a constant reminder that Shinpei and Ushio will never get a future together, that Mio will never see her sister again. She's a constant reminder of the threat of the enemy, which she's actually fighting against despite being a shadow herself. There's then of course brother and sister So and Tokiko, which understandably their dynamic takes a backseat to Shinpei's and Ushio's dynamic. I do think it is underdeveloped, especially with Tokiko. Her being the one to aid the shadows because So was seen as too weak was a great complex dynamic that kind of gets dropped almost immediately. We never see So and Tokiko talking it out, and it's just kind of quickly brushed over. I also think during the 6th loop, when Tokiko is given the memory of the shadows betraying her, she kind of gets over that very quickly. You can see her in the background clearly distressed, which is a nice touch, but it's all we get. I just wish they could have added a couple scenes of her processing the fact that she was involved in so many deaths, and it was ultimately all for nothing, but she is a minor character compared to other side characters, and what we got of her was fine. I would have liked to see more of her, since she had a very interesting part to play in the Shadow's plan. Of course, there's also Nezu and the protagonist himself, and Tetsu. Nezu's and Hizuru's odd couple type relationship was fun to watch, especially seeing how well they work together, and Shinpei is a fine protagonist. He's not overly annoying or loud, he's logical and understands what needs to be done, and And any hesitation he has isn't that he can't carry through with the plan, rather he hesitates because he knows something isn't adding up. But my favorite character by far is Mio. Hands down, get ready, it is Mio appreciation time. I think one of the reasons why I like her is that unlike other characters like Hizuru, who you know right away is going to be a badass, the first impression of Mio is that she's going to be more of a damsel distress type character, someone who constantly needs saving because she has no capabilities of saving herself, is rather ditzy, and believes there is good in everyone, and just straight up not helpful at all. At least that was my first impression, which I admit was harsh, but I've seen these characters so many times and they always annoy me. And though she is a bit ditzy and does need saving from time to time, she is way smarter and useful than I thought she'd be, which pleasantly surprised me. And honestly, I'd say she's one of the smarter ones of the bunch. The moment I knew I liked her character is in episode 4 when she, So, Tokiko, and Shadow Shinpei, though obviously no one knows he's Shadow, are at the shrine and they meet Shadow Ushio for the first time. I thought Mio would be overjoyed to see Ushio alive again, but she knows about the Shadow sickness and that Ushio saw her shadow. So instead, she immediately gets defensive and calls her a monster, telling everyone to get away from her, which is a very rational response. No hesitation, no OMG, you're alive. She knew she was a shadow and understandably assumed she was evil. Mio does a very similar thing in episode 19 when she finds out Shadow Ushio has been killed. They figured out that Shadow Ushio can hack the other shadows and free them from Hiruko's control, turning them to their side. Ushio had hacked Shadow Mio, but they hypothesized that if Ushio is killed, her hacking may be undone. So, once again, without any hesitation, Mio pins her shadow to the floor so she can't move in case she does turn back evil. Once again, a very rational decision, almost too rational in some ways. Now, with both these examples, Mio did have the wrong assumption, and Shadow Ushio and Shadow Mio were on her side, and pinning Shadow Mio did make things worse for them. But given what she knew, those were fair decisions. Yeah, she was wrong, but I like that she had the gall to do something to make those decisions, and then she later owned up to her mistakes and apologized. Love a character with self-accountability. There are other moments of her being smart, like going to Ushio's bedroom and finding her hair strand so Shadow Ushio can use the data to recover, or pretending to be Shadow Mio to avoid an awkward conversation. Oh, she's just so quick on her feet and I love it! And yeah, she does have a big crush on Shinpei, but she actively pushes that back to make sure it never gets in the way of their plans. They're all just such great characters, which really makes us feel for them when anything happens to them. There's just so many gut punches in the show. The biggest one for me is episode 9, where Shadow Ushio shows what happened to the real Ushio. We see real Ushio try and actually fail to save Shiori, making her sacrifice for nothing. Even worse, the big baddie, I hate that I said it like that, the big villain, being the one that killed both Ushio and Shiori, takes the form of Shiori, meaning they have to fight Shadow Shiori constantly, a constant reminder of what she did to the real Shiori and Ushio. It's just such a gut punch. There's also, of course, Hizuru's death in episode 20. The fact that she died because Shinpei chose to loop again to save Mio and So, allowing Shide to fight her a second time and kill her, it's just the feels. And then Shinpei couldn't loop again to save her. It's just so good. There are real consequences to Shinpei's actions that he can't take back. Her death is even sadder considering we get a few flashbacks of her as a kid and we see her with Rinosuke alive and best friend Asako. Earlier in the anime, we saw present Hizuru interacting with present Asako, and we see Hizuru realizing Asako is a shadow, which meant that Hizuru never got to see Asako alive again when she left the island. And with Hizuru dying, that means all three of them don't survive. I'm sorry the background keeps changing. The lighting. I need to get a better setup, but for now it is what it is. You're just gonna have to deal with it. That was a good stretch. There's other great moments where we found out more people are shadows. In episode 17, Shinpei and Shadow Ushio learned that a beloved teacher, Buchi, who basically taught every kid who grew up on that island, is a shadow. Oh, and then there's the scene where Shadow Ushio and Nezu go to his house where he has his wife's shadow pinned. I love this scene. It's such an intimate scene with him. Even when Shadow Ushio says she could hack his wife's shadow, he refuses, as it won't matter. His real wife is dead and not coming back. He finally draws up the courage to kill the shadow that killed his wife. And what I love about these scenes is that it helps shows the impact the shadows have had on the island. It's not just Shinpei and his friends. The island as a whole is suffering, and these scenes allow us to feel that. We feel that impact, and it's because of all those impactful scenes, those emotional gut-punching moments, is why I changed the ending. So the anime ends with Shinpei defeating Shide and Ushio erasing Hiruko from 300 years ago when she first got to the island. This then means that the shadows are never created, Ushio never dies, and the events of the anime never unfold. Now, I need to say I'm not really a fan of these type of endings. It's not quite it was all a dream, but to me it has a very similar feeling to that. All those feelings, those gut punches, character moments, everything is just made void because they didn't happen. Sure, we felt those things in the moment, but I appreciate it when those feelings are long lasting, and with everybody turning out fine, those feelings just go away. I will say I think the epilogue episode is well done. I thought it was an interesting choice that none of the characters remembered what happened, which obviously in some ways they wouldn't because technically those events never happened. And in some ways there's tragic irony in that the characters have no idea how they were heroes and stopped a disaster, which I do like. That said, Shinpei, Ushio, and Hizuru are the only ones who seem to have had a dream about those events, but don't exactly remember what they were. It does make sense why these three would partially remember. Shinpei had Hyuko's eye, Hizuru had Ryunosuke, and Ushio, well, Ushio was dead the whole time. It was her shadow Ushio that did everything. So how would she remember? Whatever. Her shadow looped with Shinpei, so I guess that justifies why she also had the dream. I do like that Hizuru's next book is titled Summertime Rendering, and it's implied it will be about the events of the anime, which is a nice tie-in and neat as people in that universe will know what happened, just not realize it's nonfiction, which I thought was cool. And it does look like Shinpei and Ushio do remember everything, and it's a nice, happy ending. But I don't want a happy ending. I want those feels. I don't like that for me, those feelings just go away. Also, picking notes, I got really annoyed at the ending because the anime is so careful about how every action, even the tiniest ones, have consequences, and yet they went back and just changed 300 years of history. They said that Hyuko turned hundreds of people into shadows 300 years ago, which means all those people are alive, which would greatly change the history of the island, and that the present will look nothing like it does. None of the main cast would exist. Pushing technicalities aside, the way I would have ended the anime is what I thought they were going to do. After defeating Shide and Hyuko, I'd have Shadow Ushio take Shinmei back to the cave where So is, with Shadow Mio, Shadow Ushio, and Ryunosuke all vanishing. I think I'll be nice and have both Nezu and Tokiko also be alive, since we never saw what happened to them in this timeline, though realistically I'd say Tokiko was able to win and survive her battle, and Nezu was not able to survive his. And then I'd have the characters deal with the aftermath. They mourn the dead, they have to pretend they don't know anything as the island copes with a bunch of missing person cases, and they try to move on with the tragedy they faced, which can be very powerful that you can move on from experiencing such trauma and loss. Not the most mind-blowing ending, granted, but I like it because what happens happens. Those feelings last as a punch knowing that Ushio and Hizuru don't get to live and almost everyone else does, with an added punch in that most people won't get to know their sacrifice and what they did. If per se I had to go with the ending where everything is undone and Shinpei loops back to on the boat, I think another ending they could have done is that everything leading up to before Shinpei is on the boat still happens, but everything after doesn't. Ushio and Shiori are all still dead, but we still get those feels, but badass Hizuru gets to live. Yay! This could possibly happen within the story, and with the added benefit that 300 years of history is not changed. I think this would be interesting since people like Hizuru, Nezu, and Tokiko would know the shadows existed, but they just suddenly vanished and they don't realize they helped make that happen. There's also an added sadness that Ushio is the only one who doesn't get to live. I felt for those characters because they didn't survive. I felt Hizuru's death and Ushio's sacrifice being for nothing. And it's amazing when stories can make you feel like that, and I just want those feelings to stay. I want to be able to look back and remember those feelings, but I just don't. Anyways, that's how I changed the ending. Like I said, it's not a bad ending by any means, it's just not my cup of tea. But thank you so much for watching me geek out about this anime. It really is underrated, and I hope more people will watch it and appreciate it. Let me know what you thought of my opinions and changes below, and I'll see you next week. Probably 2 weeks from now. I'm probably going to go to a bi-weekly schedule because these videos do be taking me a lot longer than expected. But so you don't miss out, make sure to caress the subscribe button and fondle the bell notification so you know the next time I post. Anyways, bye!